tape. I'm going to try and do a 10-word recap of that. Yeah, I'm going to assume they're going to put this on the tape, but just in case they do. I think your main point was we're not teaching to a test. We've got to teach so that a dancer can succeed at all of the calls, and we've got to be careful not only to teach them, but to keep on using them to the point where dancers retain their fluency with the calls.
Colin Walton was an early member of CALLERLAB. He was a British caller that resettled into the States and called mostly in Florida. And he did a seminar on teaching very early on in the days, and he talked about that he set himself up a 100 event level. In other words, that if you teach swing through, that you're going to consider that the dancers are exposed to it sufficiently by the time you've reached the 100 repetition of the command, of which he felt that half had to show up on the very first night to really start to ingrain that into the dancers. So that was kind of his level of approach to it, and I think a lot of times we need to approach things by numbers as an approach. Rick Pitino, who's the basketball coach at the University of Louisville now, formerly University of Kentucky and other places, his approach to teaching his players how to play is that he set up a goal every night of X number of touches of the ball, X number of shots and so forth. They weren't necessarily counted as successful shots. Is whether they touched the ball, whether they did this, whether they did that, because they were the traits of the successful players, that the successful teams always took this many shots. Now, some nights you'll make more than other nights, but it was that numbers game that allowed his teams to start to become very efficient in playing because they had a very specific goal oriented towards each event they were doing.
Yeah, David Fullaway from Maui, Hawaii. I also want to sort of put down the comment or the line that the people who are doing choreography and the people who are creating records also need to vary their or broaden, not vary, but broaden their use of terms, square dance terms, so that we're using the teaching order so that they learn, and all dancers are more uniform, so they can go anywhere and dance. So teachers.
I would make bold to say we need more singing calls like Pick-a-Lip-a-Doodle.
Which was a golden oldie, probably the most difficult singing call figure ever written. But at the same time, if I could say to you, just to the dancers that you call singing call figure number 1 and put the microphone down. And chances are they would be able to do heads promenade half, down the middle, square through 4, swing through, boys run, Ferris wheel in the center, square through 3. We all, halfway through this, you all knew exactly what I was talking about. 10 years before, it was square through 4, swing through, boys straight, turn through, and Alabama left with a new corner. And we've gone through generations of these singing call figures that have gotten to be so repetitive, and they become the lowest common denominator for our square dance floors that if we're afraid of the ability of the floor to do it, we revert to that singing call figure because we're assured of success. They know the words before you get them out of your mouth. And so changing singing call figures and finding new winners, I think Jerry Haig was one of the most successful people in finding ways to add the little tweak to the singing call figure that made it different. It was still doable, it was still danceable, but it was different. And it allowed dancers to be able to get a feel for other figures in singing calls.
Wagon Wheel's New World in the Morning is a good example.
Oh. If you're not familiar with that old figure, it was a series of square throughs and separates around 1 with the old gatepost in mind, while other people were doing the grand square. Everything was timing and execution.
Yeah.
So, yes, ma'am.
Two more minutes.
As a new caller, and I don't know the percentage of how often calls have scootbacks, same-sex scootbacks, and boy-girl scootbacks. But this year I've tried, attempted at least, to introduce this as a boy-girl scootback. And what are your thoughts on that? There are some calls that have the boy and girl. When dancers encounter that, they just go.
So let me make sure I'm understanding you. You could do scoot back where, for example, two guys are coming into the middle. Or the two girls is the norm. They're not used to it.
Well, but I think there's one other extremely important factor. The ocean way that we set up where either the boys go in or the girls go in for the scoot back is set up usually by the head square through 4, everybody touch a quarter. The waves that are created at that point are much closer than if we had done a square through 4, a slide through, a past the ocean, and tried doing the scoot back from those positions. Can I get a square up and let me demonstrate this? Yeah, one is actually much closer than the other one. Could I get a square up, please? We're not going to embarrass you or anything. Yeah. I found the remote.
And then I've got a comment to his
point. Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
It doesn't matter unless you think you'll see it better.
Oh, come on.
Good. Yeah. Can we get the chairs pulled back just a smidge more so they got a chance to spread themselves out? Good. All the heads square through 4.
Oh, good. They chose wisely.
Yeah. Good. Touch a quarter. And notice how close these mini-wave boxes are to each other. The ocean wave that's created has created a nice setup where they're nice and close together. Scoot back. And they easily find each other. Boys run. Good. Everybody past the ocean. And now I can drive a truck through the middle of the square. So the box is farther apart. So the reason they start to mess it up is not because it's a boy and a girl going in the middle. It's because they're so far apart. And, part of the thing is, let me see if I can stop moving and stop this. One of the things, give me that one.
Use a real microphone.
There we go. And so one of the things that I find in lesson groups that I got to do is show people the spot this wide apart. Now, of course, what they start to do is hedge together. And I point out they're never going to be like that in the reality of dancing. The dancing's always going to make this big hole in the square. So instead of avoiding it, I got to try to let them get used to it and point out what the problem is, why they may have a problem or a hiccup or two when they first do it, but we're going to do it enough so you get used to it. Scoot back. See, now that I pointed out the problem, plus all callers tend to be good dancers despite what you've heard. And so as a result, they're successful in doing it. Scoot back again. It doesn't matter whether there's a boy and a girl going in. It's a matter of how close the situation is. Everybody hinge, and they're close together again. It's always going to be that way. And so what we got to do is reassure dancers by their feeling in dancing that what they're doing is correct. And yes, it does feel different. And let me show you why it's different, and then we can overcome the problem. But if you never show them, if you don't understand the problem, then they're never going to get the view of how to be able to do it and handle it. They'll always crash. Good. Thank you, Square.
So now then, we're here for some purpose that I don't seem to remember anymore.
Actually, I think it segues fairly well into it. That, first off, let me introduce to you John Sybalsky from Oakland, California. I'm Mike Jacobs from Hamilton, New Jersey this week. And we're here to talk about simple sight. Now, not to be confused with simplistic sight. It's the idea of what we wanted to do was to show that with limited number of calls that you can still use a sight approach in being able to handle the material and so forth. Now, our discussion is based upon earlier here upon the new proposed teaching order for the mainstream list and what it's been divided into. And it's divided into 3 sections where there's a basic A, a basic B, and then the mainstream list. And it's the current mainstream list as we know and love, but it's just separated and done differently. There's, for instance, Circulate was moved to number 22 position on the teach order far earlier than it is on the old one. And so what I thought we'd do is to approach some things in the idea of finding a basic approach to site calling and see how that can relate into these teaching orders with a limited number of Can we get another square up? Maybe not the same people so we don't tire everybody out. So don't all leap at once. Yeah.
It's good for your soul. Just to say it hurts.
How many people in here are in their first 5 years of calling? And so depending upon what system you were introduced to in the caller school that you went to or the caller that you worked with or whatever, you're still flexing out those muscles and trying to find different ways. We still need to know the body. Oh, okay.
It's 21 on the
21
on the.
I'm sorry, I missed my number. It's 21
order,
on the new teacher order.
Not on the existing one.
Yeah. Yeah, there's you can go online and get the new proposed teach order and also the explanation of how they decided to put what where. Okay. Yeah, why they moved down, circulate, for instance. And
There ain't one of those.
So,
one with the hair.
many of you may have been introduced at. Basically, there's only three methodologies of calling. There is memorizing everything, reading everything, and then everything else. Everything else is a framework approach to how we resolve things. Whether you're using the one-person method or mental image approach to calling, or whether you're using friends and enemies, or all the other various different site calling controls, or the framework of chicken plucker, or any of the other numbers, they're all different ways. Imagine a maze in your mind, and there's all kinds of different ways to get to the center of the maze. And so eventually they all get to the same center area, and that's resolving the square. So many experienced callers use many different methodologies in the course of an evening's dance, many in the same sequence, in fact, that you will go through a number of different disciplines. So don't feel like you exclusively have to use one. But the favorite one we tend to show beginner callers is all the heads square through 4. And the original framework that brought this mentality of organization to square dancing was the chicken plucker. Do a right and left through. Dive through. I'm doing it in its totality. Centers pass through. And all we've done is carry them to what was called the other side of the square. Our center couples are now facing a different set of dancers. Do another right and left through. Dive through. And pass through, and they're brought back to the original group. Therefore, it's a secure place of knowledge to call element left from. And what you would do is, upon this framework, build things by the use of modules and zeros in order to be able to maneuver dancers around. We can also rotate the setup around. Watch. Everybody's take a gaze, whoever you want to be the person looking at their corner. They're all looking at their corner now. Star through, pass through, bend the line, and star through. And they're all back looking at their corners again, but we've rotated the setup 90 degrees, so it's now anchored from head wall to head wall instead of sidewall to sidewall where it originally was. So what that did was change the locality and the mix of the dancers so that what the dancers saw were a different mix of faces and personalities, but what we see is the same thing we saw before. So what that does is reduce the number of decisions that you have to make as a caller as opposed to what the dancers have to make, which allows you more control of the circumstances going on. You see, if you're reading material, you are a prisoner of the card that's in front of you. And you can't get any success until you get through to the end of the card, and the dancers may not be able to do that. If you memorize, you're subject to the mercy of your memory. Of whether you can remember the whole sequence and get through it. Frameworks and all the other different guises of how we get to the center of the maze provide you the opportunity to reduce the number of decisions you have to make versus the number of decisions that the dancers have to make. Let's put it back where it was. Star through, pass through, bend the line, assuming that you bend correctly, and everybody star through. Good. And we're back with the same aspect. So all we did was rotate the setup around, but it changed the geography in what was going on. Now, the thing is that that the basic chicken plucker assumes, though, that you still know most of the whole basic list. Whereas you can still duplicate chicken plucker by other methodologies, particularly the use of the gatepost. Now, watch. We're facing corner, right? Center, split the outside two, go round one, come down the middle, and star through, and pass through, and I've taken them to the other side, just like the regular chicken plucker did with the right and left through, dive through, pass through. So that's far earlier in that new proposed teaching order list. You can use the gatepost to duplicate the chicken plucker that you may have learned in the caller school. Once again, split the outside two, go round one, come down the middle, star through, pass through, and they're back on the other side of the square where they need to be for the element left. So you use the gatepost to be able to duplicate all the chicken plucker aspect. So, and at the same time, chicken plucker can be used as a technology to site call within. There's only two things you have to remember in chicken plucker, is what side of the square you're on and whether you have matched couples on the outside of the setup. Now, since the two gentlemen we have here are conveniently both dressed in blue, we can watch them, okay? So, everybody do a right and left through, okay? Square through 3. Everybody trade by. Now, am I in a position to call an element left? No, because I don't have a match couple on the outside. So decision one I have to make within sighting within chicken plucker is to get the match couple on the outside. Obviously, everybody do a right and left through. However, but if you don't have right and left through, circle half would have done exactly the same thing. Or pass through California Toro would have done exactly the same thing. So there's a wide variety of calls that can duplicate the body actions you want. Now, I've made my decision that I've got the match couple on the outside. The next question is, are they facing their corner? No, which means that you're assured that they're exactly on the other side of the square. Do a right and left through, dive through, pass through, and there's their corner. So it really only the two decisions you have to make. And so that means that if you're using chicken plucker, lose control of your modules, don't know where you are, you go back to answering two questions. Is the match couple on the outside? Are they facing their corner? If they're not facing their corner, all that means is now they're on the other side of the street, and you need to apply the second half of the chicken plucker process to bring them back across. So within the chicken plucker framework, you can actually expand into site calling and have to only meet a certain number of decisions. Now, the more complex the choreography gets, the more chances are that you'll have to do a lot of maneuvering in order to be able to get the match couple on the outside, and that's where the problem comes in being able to resolve the square greatly.
So I'm going to take a slightly different approach to this. Do an element left your corner just because we're there. Square your set. And let's have...
Actually, they're
and promenade half, sorry. Yeah. You're all... Okay, well, we'll use something to cover the smell. Let's have the heads lead to the right, veer to the left, and bend the line. So what I'm going to concentrate on, rather than you and your corner, is two couples that are side by side with each other. Now at this point, everybody do a right and left through, and the world at least is the same order that you're in your squared set, so things are in sequence. And if you look down your line, you'll see the couple that was next to you in the square. What I'm going to concentrate on is keeping those four people close to each other. And I can do a bunch of stuff that's pretty easy. We just did right and left through. Pass through. Bend the line. Notice they're still close to each other. Do a right and left through. They're back in the correct sequence. So I've got, again, two questions. Are they close to each other? And are they in the right order? And as soon as I'm here, I can do an element left. And promenade home. Do a right and left through. Again, they're still close to each other. Down to D, star through. Pass through. They're still close to each other, but now you're You're very close to your corner, do an Allemande left, come back and promenade home. So what I'm concentrating on is the simplicity of keeping those 4 people close to each other. This is isolated sight in one of its forms. Head square through 4, I'm going to take a variant on the same idea. Okay, now I'm going to look at the 4 people in one half of the square, and I'm going to keep them close to each other. Veer to the left. I'm going to break out of the beginning of the list. Couples circulate. Notice you're still close to them. Bend the line. You're still close to them. Pass through. Wheel and deal. We've got the paired people on the outside. You're still close to them. Centers do a right and left through. Oops, we've got some variant there. Pass through. You're back again. Allemande left your corner, and you're in business. So again, it's keeping people. And then promenade home, pick a direction. I'm doing a whole bunch of things that simplify my life early in the game. When I started sight calling, I lost track of simplicity as a guiding principle, and I could never resolve to save my life. And it was only when Jim Pulaski finally took me aside and beat me upside the head and said, keep people close together for a while until you get used to it, that it started succeeding.
And the same, physical process that I had beaten in my head was that pattern was a great mystery to me. And it was only when I was talking with another more experienced caller that had the same problems in working pattern that he awoke in me the what modules can do for you. And so, and particularly he revealed the magic module to me. And so, and if you're not familiar with what that is, head, step in, it'll turn and face your corner. Everybody, now, magic modules, this is a 0 box. They're facing their corner. Magic modules convert the 0 box into a 0 line. Now, the first one was everybody swing through. Girls circulate, boys trade. Boys run, bend the line. You will notice they are now in a line of 4, a 0 line with their partner. They're in sequence. And so basically that's called the conversion module or the magic module. And there are various calls that become magic modules. For instance, touch a quarter. All 8 circulate and the boys run right. We've gone from a 0 line to the 0 box. Spin chain through. And the girls circulate too. Ever wonder why you always heard that in combo? It's because boys run around the girls, bend the line, and there we are in the 0 line. So, particularly if you're in your first 3 years of calling, you need to dance to experienced callers in the area and start observing what they do. Now, that will also give you the reputation as a bad dancer because you're paying attention to other things now. But at the same time, it's a way to be able to research things and get a real feel for it. I discovered much more of my choreography dancing on the floor than reading any material out on the outside. It became real to me in the square, and I could see the relationship as it developed. I particularly learned to sight call by dancing other callers, and suddenly I was watching what they were doing, and I realized suddenly, hey, they're there. What are they using for a get out? And it would be something different. And that's where I picked up the material. And so we all research from each other. And it doesn't matter how skilled the caller is. There's a whole subset of material that I use for difficult plus and advanced that I picked up from a person that isn't even calling anymore that I regretted giving him the guest tip at my club. But I discovered a bunch of ideas that he was doing badly that I did better later on. So you can get the ideas from anywhere. It's just a matter of being able to research it. And the best places researching is out live on the floor. But notice how we convert it back and forth constantly. We can convert again. Yeah, the way the magic module works in reverse with the original one, which was the girls circulate, boys trade bit, is that you add a slide through to either side. Everybody slide through. They're in 0 lines, mind you. Swing through. Past the ocean would have worked just as well as a slide through. Girls circulate, boys trade. Boys run around the girls. Bend the line and slide through. That's the slide through on the other side of the magic module. We're in the 0 box. So that's the conversion factor going back the other way. Notice I wasn't really dependent upon how the floor was doing it to be able to know where I was going with the material. I made one decision to use the magic module to convert from 0 lines to 0 box. The dancers had to make about 7 or 8 decisions. Leaves me in much more control. I can worry about the music. I can worry about the sound. I can worry about what the flow is doing and so forth. One of the other particular advantages of modules is that within the module, usually the units fit together well. So you're no longer trying to face, am I making the right decision flow-wise for the dancers out on the floor? They already fit together. So the only thing worry you have to have is fitting one module up against the other one. But at the same time, it leaves me free that I can utilize these ideas in citing it. Okay? We're currently facing the corner, right? Good. Right and left through. Dive through, pass through. I've used a chicken plucker to take to the other side. Okay? Swing through. Girls circulate. Boys trade. Boys run. Bend the line. I've done a conversion into some kind of line. I know it's out of sequence because I went to the other side of the square. Mm-hmm. But I also know that I can convert it back with slide through, swing through, girls circulate, boys trade. Now you know why AC/DC is so popular now too. Boys run around the girls, bend the line, and slide through. I can resort back now to chicken plucker, right and left through. Dive through, pass through, and there's their corners. Okay? Now, I made 4 decisions. The dancers danced about 20 calls. When the odds get in your favor, you have more control.
So we've done a whole bunch of progressing here. And I think it's important to be aware that we started out with a couple of basic ideas, and we've been building on them progressively. The idea of conversion modules, using zeros and equivalents. You could use mental image in this to the extent that you're comfortable using it as a way of tracking where people are. How many people, just out of curiosity, came in here believing that site calling was going to tell them what they could call next? Good. Because in the 70s, a lot of people believed that. And a lot of people went down in flames.
And in particular, John Kay I've done a number of schools and things with, and he's a big proponent of the very first lesson you need to learn is using the call analysis sheets. Yep. If you don't know what the calls do, then you're going to be at the helpless command of the dancers. You know, that you're going to be controlled by them because you have to see what they do, and you can't call a call until the dust clears. So being in control of the choreography means knowing what the calls do, what hand blends in the next one, the direction in which the bodies are flowing, what's comfortable after something else. And that's all what the call analysis sheet can do for you and develop your idea of the call.
And each of those things that you mentioned about the call is one of Colin Walton's 100 event things that's got to get practiced, because it doesn't just work for dancers, right? If you get the hand flow for one pair of calls right and you do it 100 times, it's yours. And it will just come out of your mouth because you know it feels good.
I don't think I've ever really memorized a module. It's a case of seeing it done and being on the floor and realize it's being done to me and seeing where it went and what happened on. I used what I thought was a flow module. Everybody slide through. Okay. Now, notice where the girl is beside the guy right now. Okay? So, do a right and left through. Send the ladies Dixie style to a wave. Starts with the right, swing through, and chain down the line. It's a wonderful flow module. It's difficult.
Yep.
And look where the girls are. All it is a lady's chain. But it was, and I probably didn't realize that until I was in the middle of a caller school teaching it as a flow module and realized it was a lady chain when I got it done. I wasn't really caring about analyzing what it done and where it went. But now, I'm in complete control of it. But I didn't memorize any of that material. It was a matter of getting together, used to calling it and seeing it done, feeling it done when you're dancing out on the floor, that it then becomes yours. And really, that's probably a more effective way of learning a module than trying to memorize it.
I agree.
Yeah. Everybody, let's see, we're chained across. Flutter wheel. Good. And slide through. Now, you realize flutter wheel is a men's chain. So, I had my ladies' chain first, so I did my men's chain and neutralized it. So, and that's the way you need to start thinking of things choreographically. Most things only end up being either a right and left through, a slide through, which is a 90-degree turn, or a ladies' chain. When you get down and everything boiled down to things, that's where they are at that point, or sashaying. And so it basically only boils down to 4 or 5 different movements. And so you think of it that way and apply the words that do that for the movement. But everybody do a right and left through and veer to the left. Now we all, if you don't know, that's the same place that swing through boys run would have done for you. If you want to duplicate chicken plucker, couple circulate. I brought those people to the other side of the square, and I can fool with them over here, chain down the line. Star through, and all I've done is put them on the unmatched couple on the outside. I'm ready to bring them back across. Pass through, trade by, same as the dive through, pass through, and there I am. And I haven't gotten out of chicken plucker, folks. That many people tend to sneer at that as being something simplistic, and Tony Oxenine's built a whole career around it. And he's the first one to be able to tell you that too. So I'm not doing anything out of house here. So,
but it's all in that move across, do something, come back idea. One simple idea, very powerful.
Yes, sir. Let's get you on the mic.
I like what you do. I've been calling quite a while. I never learned it all, of course. I'm Ed Claflin from Nebraska, but in relation to what you're telling there, when I was a new dancer, it probably never even clicked for a couple of years. But actually, if you guys think about it, if you're in standard positions and you're starting to call, and you probably lose your train of thought. So if you do the same thing twice in a row, you're going to come right back where you start from. I don't care.
There is one caveat to that. It's the complete thing is if you've screwed up, do it twice. If it still doesn't zero out, you do it the third time. The third time will give you that. So for instance, the old pass-through wheel and deal double pass-through module and put centers in and cast off, all of that zeroed on 3 instead of zeroing on 2. Yeah, right. And so most things will zero on 2, and there's a rare, for instance, slide through zeros on 4. It's 4 slide-throughs that will get you back to the spot. So, but that's the unique type. Most of them will zero on 2, and if they don't zero 2, do it the third time, and then you're assured of it.
One more thing. Yes. One more thing that I do, and I'm not saying it's the right thing to do, but I work on my girls. I mean, I keep track of the girls because that way they help me out. In other words, if you square through 4, you have the opposite lady, of course. And, of course, you're looking at the corner. If you star through, you chained your girls. Mm-hmm. So you have to chain them back. And if you have a couple circulating across the square, if your ladies chain back, then you have an opposite girl again. So you have to star through and get her back and go back. So that's the basis that I work on, and not that that's true, and I'm not a whiz at it. So.
Let me show you something. Step to an ocean wave. The ultimate 4 ladies chain is all 8 circulate. Look exactly where this person is from that center girl. That's the girl that's diagonally across from the girl that he's adjacent to right now. All 8 circulate. And now they're adjacent. Now, you didn't change the sequence the boys were in. You didn't change the sequence that the girls were in. Therefore, it must be a 4 ladies chain. Which means that if you're on some search to try to find the right combination of people to be able to call things there, and you can't find them in this ocean wave, they got to be over there. There's only 8 people in the square. And the way that you get all those 8 people together is doing all 8 circulate. If you don't like this combo, all 8 circulate. And they got to be here because there's no other place to hide them. And so it's a completely different way of looking at things, but it frees you up a whole lot. And when you're in trouble, you got something to go back to that can help sort things out for you. The worst sensation is trying to figure out who I need to be with to resolve this square, and nothing's looking familiar. It's because you're looking in the wrong spot. Okay? And another aspect of things is also realize that there's two places to look. You look down the ocean wave, but you also look down the box. It's just as good, vital direction as down this way. That way you've covered both aspects of things. If they aren't over here, then they got to be in here.
So quick, where's your partner? Mm-hmm. Okay. So I was keying on the two guys in blue.
Right.
Because they're easy for me to find. And I was having a heck of a time finding him in this wave. And he called all he circulate, and it just didn't help. Because he's over in that wave. But he's in the same box now. Yeah.
Yep. And so you can manipulate individual dancers by having individuals circulate, and that may find a combination that you're looking for. And there's plenty of people that use either ocean wave or two-face line choreography to line those dancers up. Let's see. Okay, recycle. Veer to the left. Good. If I wanted to put partners together, I could individually move boys here. Boys circulate. And I would line partners up at that point. And my only decision-making process would be, whether they were in sequence or out of sequence. They're out of sequence at this point. If I tried to circulate somebody home, somebody else would bump into you. And so I always try to explain things down to the easiest simple things. The way you tell you screwed up sequence is when somebody runs into somebody on their way home. So but that visualization of trying to get people in the correct order helps you to be able to efficiently work with the people that you want to work with and translate things down to simple English. A football quarterback may know or understand the physics of the spheroid that he's holding and where he's got to go with it and what pressure's put where and so forth. But basically it comes down to is can I get rid of the ball before the 350-pound lineman runs me over? And so I remember Sonny Jurgensen talking about it as he looked at his first receiver, looked at his second receiver, and then the guy in the stands got it. But that's the way you need to think, because you're like the football quarterback up here, scrambling around trying to find a target before you get run over. And so finding effective ways of being able to react as opposed to having to mentally think it out leave you in much more control.
Well, I'm not sure how to follow that one, because that's so right.
Well, it's visually right now. Do you all recognize they're out of sequence? Bend the line, and you'll notice that this is out of sequence at this point. So a right and left through would fix the situation and put them back into the zero line. Good. Everybody pass through. California twirl. Do you notice I just put them back out of sequence? Therefore, the pass-through California twirl and the right and left through are all equivalent.
Mm-hmm.
So, basically then anything in this situation that puts them back the other way then becomes a right and left through in your mind. So now there's a pigeonhole here that's called right and left through that has dozens of options in it. You think right and left through, the dancers get to think something else because you use line as equivalents.
So now let's expand slightly. Past the ocean. Scoot back. Question, how many calls to resolve from here? How many calls does it take to do something that gets me resolved? No, they are not out of sequence.
No, they're not.
I say 0 calls. I can call right and left grand from here. Another target you can look for. Okay, so I'm building again in a slightly different direction.
And if you want to go the other way, it's obviously also a turn through to an element left.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Okay, all 8 circulate. You're not there from here. So I find that over time I've built up a catalog of places I recognize. And this is one of them. You're all in sequence, and your partner is chained across from you. All 8 circulate, and a right and left grand. And if it comes out about that fast, boom, and you do it. Or at least some of you do it. And promenade home.
It's good for you. It's aerobic.
Yes, right. Keeps your brain moving.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. I think I did. Heads lead right. So I'm going back into isolated site mode here. I've got you and them. You're both paired. I'm going to keep you together. Swing through. Boys trade. Boys run. Bend the line. And at this point, we've done a men chain. Right. Do a right and left through. Flutter wheel. And now with the ladies chain, you're back with your partner. Right. Past the ocean. Can I call plus for a second? Single hinge and roll. And a right and left grand. Dun, 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 dee, 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 da, dee, da. Promenade home. But again, it's the same basic idea. 4 people, I get them to a place I know. I can use modules and knowledge of ladies' chains, get them back where they were, and I've got a way out.
And Deuce Williams, who was probably one of the greatest choreographers we ever had in dancing, and always one of the great tragedies, but he always advocated the balanced approach to things. That if as unique as John's resolves to right and left grands have been, that a steady diet of that, and that being your total aspect of resolving, would make you boring no matter how clever they all were done. Balancing it with the full balance of element left, of squared set at home, into promenades, into right and left grands, suddenly you've got the dancers a little bit more off balance, a little bit more on the back of their heels, and therefore they're being forced to actually dance to the music instead of expecting words, and then it becomes a constant race between you and them to see who was going to get there first with the next command. So by keeping a little bit of element of surprise in what you're doing, you keep them off balance, and therefore they're forced to dance to the music. What a novel concept.
I find that particularly with at-home resolves. The first one is cute.
Yeah.
The second one in a row is okay. By the time I've hit the 4th one, I'm trying to backtrack 4 calls and tell where it's coming from. And so is every dancer I'm watching. And it's no longer funny.
Yeah, you telegraphed it. And so they're seeing it. And so, and the element of, particularly squaring set at home, is the element of surprise. Of being able to get there with no expectation of suddenly going to be there. All the heads star through in California twirl because you're probably tired of doing square through. Good. Do a slide through. Right and left through. Slide through in the center's roll. Pop. You're home. Yeah. So that aspect where they're expecting a completely different formation and the roll is so sudden, then suddenly you're setting up a squared set position that's unexpected, and and then it suddenly becomes fun for the dancers. At the same time, if they've never done squared sets at home, you may have them also not surprised at all because they didn't even understand the premise of the bit anyway. You've got to judge the floor before you judge what material you call for it.
You got to know how to tell a joke.
Yeah. And as we get into more of a difficult choreography, the more we need all kinds of different methodologies of using things. As we get into the full mainstream list, there's lots more complementary material there, and you need to understand what it does. Head star through, for instance. Everybody, now, let's pick a foursome of dancers. Let's say this box of 4. Double pass through. Cloverleaf. Is that box of 4 still in contact? Yes. Up and down this column is that original box of 4 we looked at. So that when you're doing isolated sight, it's really a matter of how truly you isolate them. And you got to get used to watching that group of four together and seeing where they go. The vast majority of the calls do keep them in contact. Very few actually separate them. And so it's just a matter of understanding what you're doing with it. Centers pass through, touch a quarter. I still got to force them in contact, but they're in the ocean wave now. Okay, what would take them out of contact? All eight circulate. And now they're one spot removed from each other, and it's hard seeing where it all is. All eight circulate again, though, like the gentleman suggested, the second application put them all back together. One of the things that's interesting is the original philosophy behind the plus list was, what could we go to a really good club level dance and call or get away with calling by being able to cue it, or we felt the dancer would be exposed to it. We also used some festivals that had particularly good dance floors as a model for how we picked the calls that went on plus. And so, as a result, a lot of the calls at Plus actually fit very well into the modular system of calling. Several of them are zeros. Others are simple equivalents to star through or right and left through. And as a result, they're very easy to plug into a system.
Even the most complicated is just switches two people.
Yeah. You want to show?
Let's see, we've got guys facing in, right? Single hinge and swing through just to get something normal. Okay, watch the guy on the end who's facing in. Spin chain and exchange the gears. F. They go three, they turn, gals turn around.
So there's the turn back over here.
This is the turn back and join the star, one left-hand star.
Yeah.
Star goes three, you're going to lead it, be careful.
Yeah.
Follow her all the way around, and the girls are flipping in. And they've swapped spots.
Yeah.
Actually, everybody else has swapped spots, and they've stayed where they were, but the net effect is those two guys traded.
The net effect is the two guys changed, but we moved everybody else over to them rather than moving them. Yeah. And so, the reason that Bill Davis invented our choreographic language was so we could talk to each other, at least in written form, rather than having to say, that spot where you do recycle to a right and left grand from? Well, you can do this here. Well, so that becomes real cumbersome to try to communicate between each other, and that's why the terminology got invented. It's hard understanding how the terminology succeeds in communicating, but it was really meant only as a written form of communication and not as something verbally. We're still stuck with this.
But this has the whole box 1 4 to 0 line or 0 box to 0 line conversion effect, because it switches two people. I mean, the difference between a 0 box and 0 lines is effectively two ladies chained somewhere. Not a pair of two ladies chains, but like the head ladies chain is the net effect. You are now next to your partner, yes? I thought I heard a nope there.
Yeah.
Okay. So I could do scoot back and right, left, grand. Don't do it. Don't do it. Spin chain and exchange the gears again. Turn around on the end.
Yeah.
Turn around.
You have to turn around, and then this.
You're going to lead it again. Boy, the girls' part of this is hard, isn't it?
Yeah. You do understand why we don't do the video recording of these sessions and how we never get a dancer up.
Okay, so now at this point we've got the original head couples have their partners. The original side couples now have their opposites, which means if I call recycle from here, go ahead and do it. There's your corner. Okay. I could have done it again and done one of the swing through, turn through, element left, or swing through right and left grand get outs. Same basic idea again.
And thus a fairly complex call is simply a lady's chain in your mind. As far as your evaluation of what's going on the floor, dancers have to do the whole call. We don't. And that leaves us then at an advantage. The greatest fear of anybody beginning calling, or even the first 5 or 6 years, is what decisions do I make and how to avoid for all those people to just be stopped standing looking at me. And there's that fear factor in trying to keep control of everything. And when you factor in whatever your laptop may be using as far as adding music in, or whether it's frozen in time now, or what on the turntable, or how the music is, or how loud your voice is in relationship to the music, and all the other additional things that you have to factor in your decisions as a caller, if we can reduce the one decision area and keep it under our control, it leaves you freer to control other things.
So we've gone through a whole bunch of things here that are core simplifying ideas. There's the idea of just sequence. There's the idea of keeping 4 people together. There's the idea of ladies' chains. There's the idea of conversion from 0 box to 0 line. Each of those is a thing. And if you don't practice it, you will never become fluent with it. And you've got to practice it enough to the point where you don't have to think about it anymore. This is where Colin's 100 repeats comes in again. The idea is to push all of that stuff, just like dancers, when they learn to dance well, they've pushed the calls down into their feet and they're not thinking about what they're doing. You've got to push this down into your soul so that you're not having to think, 2 ladies chain here. Okay, it starts to become automatic. And then you've got the attention to give to, well, I should raise the music here, and maybe I should do a little syncopated calling, and you can concentrate on the other things that will make the dancer experience more special because you've got the bass.
Have any of you ever seen the movie Amadeus? And there was the scene where Solari and Mozart are talking to each other about notes, and they're hearing them in their minds. And so they knew where the other person was going. They could see what was going on and the mathematics of it all. And that's what eventually becomes your skill level with using the material like John talked about here, is that you can think in square dancing. Right now you made a position where you have to think in English and translate it over into square dancing. And so, but eventually those factors become part of your controlling aspect in controlling choreography.
It's like learning a foreign language, and learning to think in French
Yes.
is a big step. If you're learning French, you've got to do it. It will happen.
Yeah. And so, are there any questions from the floor that we need to use as a square? Okay, why don't you all take a break?
Thank you.
You've been up
Thank
a while.
you very much. Work harder, work harder.
It's good for you. How many of you learned chicken plucker at a caller school, or used that as methodology of calling? Are you still using it, or, yeah. And so, do you see suddenly the other aspects you could add to it of citing within the framework of the chicken plucker, and that can provide you a lot of other freedom of usage of material, and not just necessarily have to have a set module that you have to go through in order to be able to do something. Any other questions from the floor? So.
Virtue is its own punishment.
Yeah.
Hang on a sec.
Yeah, I know the game. John Coltonton of Pocono Pines. Somebody asked a question about where do you get that call analysis sheet, and the answer is that is a standard handout at the CALLERLAB office. You may or may not be able to get it online, but if you call the office, they'll send you as many copies as you need. And believe me, that's probably the best singular training tool that we have, the call analysis sheet.
And it's not just, what is it equivalent to? That's got to be the question you look at when you look at a call. What does it do? How does it manipulate the dancers? What hand is available after the conclusion of the call?
Can I roll? Can I sweep a quarter? Can I veer left or right comfortably? All of those are things to think about.
There's a favorite list of mine, which I'm going to be using another panel, is my list of the 10 neglected mainstream calls. And they're obviously neglected to me because as I call all over the country and see dancers out there dancing them, and I either see them perform badly, perform wrong, or no awareness of the call at all. And it's surprising the number of mainstream calls that fall into that category. Tons of places I've gone to and passed to the center, I get the pass-through, and that's about all I get. The people on the outside don't partner trade. Obviously, they're not hearing the call very often because, I mean, I can't imagine that it's that hard to teach that they partner trade on the outside. Therefore, the dancers must not be getting the frequency of doing the call to be able to be comfortable with it. And where does that fall on? Falls on our heads. If I see dancers, can I hang on to this a second, John? Can I borrow you a second? All right. So, look at me, and we're going to box the net. So, box the net. Now, I was going to try to rotate, which is the proper way of doing box the net, and she's got me so much on the grip here that I've ended like this. And this can't be a physically comfortable place. Look how our elbows are turned back out. And so, were you showing initial dance lessons to rotate your hands on Boxinette? Can you think back to that time? Okay, so that we have to rotate this handhold. No, don't rotate. All we want to do is rotate the handhold, not the arm and the wrist. Okay, so this comes around like that, and now we're in position to execute the next call. See, if we turn like this, and we try to do a right and left through, or we try to do a square through, this firm pull by is going to be excruciating. So we need to rotate. So I've seen tons of dancers end like this out on the floor, which means they're not being taught to rotate. What's worse is when I see this, that the girl gives me a left from the Boxinette. And that's because they've been, first off, the woman, thank you, the woman. Hello, 1, 2. Okay, so the woman's been told to use the left hand with the star through in the California twirl, hits Boxinette, and suddenly has to use the right hand with the guy to make an arch and function with it. So that's one aspect why they give the left hand, but I've also found that there were callers out there saying that all Boxinette is a star through and a quarter more. So no wonder the girl hands the left hand to the guy. We are setting ourselves up for defeat when we don't teach properly. So I see calls fall into that category. I see, another out of position call is Dixie style to a wave, where the boys are not taught to slide over here when the girl leaves, so that it's just a left touch, a quarter action to finish the Dixie style to a wave. Otherwise, they stand here planted, and the girl has to fling this guy 3/4 of the way around to get him into the center of the left-handed wave. So no wonder they do Dixie style badly when they weren't shown easy ways to do it. So it is, since dancers aren't hatched, they have to be taught. It's got to be back on our heads where the problem's coming from. So either we don't use the calls, we don't teach them correctly, or we don't add the little refinements that make the call comfortable. Now, you may think, well, that's adding to the intricacy of the teach. But, if I was playing golf and the golf pro showed me that I could get another 100 yards by turning my hand a little bit, I'd learn to turn my hand a little bit because it would make it possible for me to win the golf match. And so if it makes it possible for the dancer to win doing the sequence, then it's really incumbent upon us to take the time to teach it correctly and not do a half-assed job of teaching it and end up producing the dancers that I'm seeing out there.
You mean we're supposed to produce dancer value? What a novel thought.
What are your other 7 most neglected?
Boxinette pass to the center, Dixie style to a wave, touching hands after the completion of a call, all 8 circulate. Let's see. Hinge. Spin chain through. How many have I got?
Wheel and deal?
No, wheel and deal I see done often enough. Let me look at the list real quick. So, wheel around, yes, thank you.
Wheel around, good.
Cross run and fold. You know, if one of the measures, we're going to be doing this later in the sussing session, fold is one of the early calls that I utilize to gauge a floor. If they don't recognize the command, then I know that I'm in trouble with another 12 calls. If they haven't been taught to execute a fold, I simply set up head screw through 4, touch a quarter, scoot back, and the boys fold. Dance action is there. It's very easy. And if they don't recognize it at all, it means that it's going to be a long evening. Because chances are there's another 12 calls they don't know. And whether they missed a lot of lessons, I mean, no matter how good a caller is, you'll graduate a stinker once or twice in the course of a year. And so they either couldn't attend all the lessons, they had this kind of problem, they have hearing problems that they don't acknowledge, other things, the factors that may get in their way of dancing well. But more often than not, it's also a lot of bad teaching. Or forgetful teaching. You don't miss teaching it, but you miss repeating it, so you get to that 100 call level. And so they've only heard the call the 5 or 6 times you did it and then escaped using it for the rest of the time. And thus they never reach that 100 call plateau, and they never get good at it. And then they got to make it up out on the street. You know, I had a gentleman when I called in Louisville, Kentucky, that danced with my mother up into advanced dancing. And when he took advanced lessons, it was the first set of lessons he'd ever taken in his life, because he started dancing in the early 40s, where everything you learned was at the dance that night. And so imagine picking up the entire mainstream and plus list by some little workshop that got done at a dance, or picking it up on the fly from somebody else telling you about it. You know, it leaves little holes in your learning. And he paid for it then in taking advanced lessons. So you can imagine what it was like for him. And so, you know, if dancers have to pick it up on the fly out in the street and not in regular lessons, they're always going to have a problem with the particular call until some way, if they're lucky enough, they master it. So, you know, I know it's so hard in the limited amount of time we're given to teach lessons to be able to effectively teach everything. But, you know, we got to find ways of doing it, and finding all the right words that really help you describe it is one of the things of homework we need to do to be able to effectively present the material in front of me. Yeah. So
I'm curious. There are a whole bunch of different ways of managing choreography, and I'm curious how many people use mental image. Just by show of hands. 3, 4. Modules. Zeros and equivalents. I have no idea. It does.
I'm curious about those that raise their hand on mental image, because I know that Wayne Morvan understands it perfectly, and Don Beck certainly does. But there's a lot of the aspects of mental image that I really don't see as such. So, I mean, and if you really utilize it as a calling methodology, I'm curious to hear what might be your approach on things. So,
you had to ask, right?
I'm not challenging you. I'm just, yeah.
It's curiosity.
Okay, David Holloway from Maui. It's really difficult, but I was fortunate. I started out square dancing when only 20 calls were necessary. Back in the 40s and 50s. I've been calling and dancing a long, long time. But if you have an imagination, and if you can already in your mind picture things already, in other words, if you're a good dreamer, start dreaming squares up there. But I can call, and I can turn my back on the whole group, and I can call to a square in my mind. It's an image I have in my mind. And I can do fairly complex calls. I can't do chain exchange the gears that way, but a good 2/3 of the mainstream and some of the plus calls are in my mind. The other thing I like to add, though, Bill Peters. I was fortunately mentored by Bill Peters at the last 5 or 6 years, and he just said, David, you've got to take that sheet that he mentioned, and you have to know the beginning and the end position of every call. Once you know that, you own it, and when you own all those calls, you can use them. If you can use them, if you have the fortune of being able to image in your mind, practice it, because it's a good tool.
Am I on? There we go. One of the things of mental image that struck me with Wayne was that his point is that you always carried your own backup group for resolving the square with the other side of the square. Since the vast majority of calling that we utilize nowadays is symmetrical, that means that whatever happens to the box of 4 you're watching is already happening also with the box of 4 on the other side of the square. So that if you drop this one, your backup is in that square already. You simply switch over to the other group of 4, and it becomes a negative image of the group you memorized. You know, if you're looking at the group of 4 over there being the number 1 man and the opposite lady, then the negative image of it is in the other box. So if you lose it over here, you just simply go over there to that side and look for the match pair on the outside over there and resolve. Since you already have the control knowing where you were at and that you already carry your own backup system within the square you're looking at. So it's not just, I got to abandon the square and go over to the other group. You really got your own backup foursome in the other group of 4 that's in the square. Assuming they don't screw up.
That's why you watch 3 squares. So the people who site call, how many squares do you keep track of as pilots? Let's start with 1. I see 3, I see 2, I see 3s and 2s. That seems about typical.
I write all them down before I start the tip. You know, I mean, paper and pencil were invented a long time ago, folks. and it doesn't say you're cheating to write down the corners. Frankly, I can't read my handwriting after I've written them down. What it is, though, it's kind of the operation of I've forced myself to observe it and think about it. And that amount of focus is sufficient enough for me to memorize that combination there. And so, but if I don't do the exercise, then I don't add the sufficient concentration to really memorize it. So having the operation associated with it, the mnemonic, makes it possible for me to remember what they are.
I've discovered as I've gotten older, sorry, John K., that I can't remember and I have to look.
Yeah.
When you write, do you write all 4 or you just write 1 and 4?
I only write down, the 2 couples I memorize together. They could be 2 and 3. They could be whatever combination, as long as I get the L shape out of it, and that gives me sufficient control to be able to pick out, the rest of the square to resolve it. And, I probably don't switch to square 4 or 5 unless something's really trash the ones I'm in. But you never know when the 4 is going to get silly either. So, it's handy to have that combo. And there's been times where it's actually got that involved to a point that I'm matching one couple from one square and another couple from another square. And that's really difficult, but at the same time, you're potentially getting those choices down through the phaser operation to where you're finally going to be at the resolve. So chances are you're not going to be that far away, and may just simply be a decision of who the matched couple is, that nobody was really matched as far as outfits or anything else in the square you were looking at that's done it right, and I used a cross-check into the other square to make sure that was the matched couple. So it's a matter of shifting as your strategy shift. It's again, go back to the sports analogy. You may find that this particular cornerback is weak on covering the person you're trying to throw to. So that's where you go to all the time. But every once in a while, somebody comes over and helps him, so you shift over here. And so it becomes literally that kind of little bitty game back and forth, but it's just strategy, again, on how to make everything a win for everyone.
I, on the other hand, find that I have to write down all 4 couples, partly because I play in the sandbox where complexity is part of the game. It's what dancers come to me to get. And that means that there's a high propensity for error. It tends to happen in half the square. And I need the cross-check of the other half. And besides, sometimes, you're looking through squares to see somebody, and you can see those 2 couples, and you can't see the original pair. Now, which order were they in? It's helpful.
The whole process of this calling is very similar to medical triage. If you watch MASH or any of the other constant medical shows, ER and whatever, they're always doing triage when a massive number of cases come in. And there are the people that don't need your help to be successful. There are the people in the middle that will only be successful if they get your help. And then there are the people that are never going to be successful. And you've got to be willing to let somebody die to save the other group. The best part about it is that our casualties resurrect themselves after every sequence. So, that's the good part. But, somewhere along the line, you can help a square that literally you should let go, to the point where you've actually damaged the rest of the squares on the floor. And so there is a time when you realize that they're not listening to you. And so if they're not listening to you, it's fruitless to then try to talk to them. So I just simply look at them saying, I'll be back, and go on to the rest of the floor. And, and the quicker you can resolve them, the quicker you can get back to them again and try to maybe approach the same problem, either a different angle, different way, a little more helper words, whatever, to make them more successful through whatever they screwed up the first time.
That's something that you are really good at, that really makes your dances succeed in our area, is you'll throw something out. Some number of people, through inadvertence or not listening or because they're hopeless, fail the first time out. You come back and you're not explicit about it, but you'll come into the same idea more simply. You'll give more helper words. People will get through it, and you watch the light bulbs go on. And they realize dancers realize that the light bulbs have just gone on in their head about what happened. You don't got to beat them.
And usually what it is that maybe the first time the simplest way to talk to dancers on the floor is to isolate them by sex. Now, in the days of all position, it's bad news to say the boys do this and the girls do that. That's the easiest way to talk on the people on the floor, because every other item of identification is artificial jargon. Centers, ends, leads, trailers, bells, bows, all of those words involve some kind of translation factor in the dancer's mind. For the most part, with the exceptions of usually kids groups and gay groups, and some singles groups as well, it's boys and girls are still something you can talk to as an automatic label. And so as long as they're evenly divided, you can isolate the boys to do this and the girls to do that. So that sometimes in these type of problems, I didn't approach it that way the first time. So I'll go back and set it up so that, let's say that I wanted to do peel off. So the obvious way is to do head star through, double pass through. But the peel off you set up puts the same sex together, and you got 2 different sets of people doing 2 different sets of things. So the next time through, instead of setting up that setup, I'll do the head spur off, swing through, boys run, tag the line. I've got 1 sex in the lead and 1 sex trailing, so when they're done with the peel off, I can identify the girls on the end and the boys in the middle, and that helps them rally if they make a mistake and gives them a little more direction in executing the call. So I set up a more user-friendly spot, and the user is me, not them, in order to be able to get them to the right spot on the floor to be able to dance. They still get to see the call, but it's a little bit easier than the way I may have showed it the first time. And I think that's a handy place to approach a lot of the problems. I don't approach sashaying couples in squares in lessons until very late in the process. I want them to have 100 times of doing swing through from where the boys run, then girls in the middle. Swing through is probably a bad example because I do it a lot from both positions. But the same sex wave swing through, for instance, I don't approach it till far later down the line. But it's after they've gotten 100 call commands under their belt that I approach it that way. And so I still haven't approached the sashayed square through with my beginner's lessons right now. I will. It's on my plans. But I want them to have experience first. It particularly with any large pattern call, I want the pattern to be something they become acquainted with so that when I move, we saw what happened with a lot of the guys that were dancing the girls' part here on the spin chain and exchange the gears. They just haven't been in that spot. And so, but if you get the pattern of the figure down in their minds first and then start to change who's in that, then it helps. But sashayed is probably the last destination I want to do. Because if I do it with two boys together, two girls together, then I'm assured that one of the boys and one of the girls is dancing the spot they learned, and the other two are the ones that are hitting something strange. Mm-hmm. So I've got some strength in the floor.
Yeah, you progress. I find, contrariwise, that if I push the mixed sex things early and concentrate on the pattern and repeating the pattern, half by the right, half by the left. No, I didn't say half by the right, girls by the left. Half by the right, half by the left. Swing through. Centers 3/4 and start walking. Somebody joins on the end. It's a guy this time. 6 by the right, 4 by the left. Somebody else joins on, 6 by the left. That I have to be careful early in the game and repeat. But, again, I'm playing in a weird sandbox where people expect this. I can progress toward complete mastery much faster.
And we need to get an appreciation for how difficult some of these figures are.
Very.
I mean, really, the Deucey is really difficult. If you have the dancers just watching what they're doing and moving around, you got dancers going every which direction. And so it really becomes, we may get started down the relay the Deucey action, and about halfway through, we start to see it deteriorate and fall apart, and that's because some dancers become reluctant about moving around the corner. Other dancers don't release other dancers. Nobody moves off over here, and it starts to disintegrate. It's a pretty, so we've identified just in discussion and stuff, maybe that there's 6 dance actions, not parts, but actions that had to be completed in doing the call. And that's starting to reach the stamina limit of the square.
And there are places, those are 6 places where people have got to come together in a coordinated way before they can know what to do to go on.
And back to our original premise, all of these are factors that you need to do in appreciating how to be able to sight with this grouping. And the fact that really the deuce is a 0 really helps along the way there. It leaves you free for them to go through a very complex process, which means then that you could also turn and help the dancer. There's no pressure on you because you know it's a 0. So you know where it's got to end and where it's going to be when you're done. So that leaves you free. You wear 3 hats as a caller. You're the opposing team in this game. You're the coach of the home team, and you're the ref. And it leaves you free to be the ref and the coach, as opposed to being the opposing team. So, we have any other questions? And so if not, we want to thank you all for coming. Hope you enjoy the rest of the convention, and we'll see you all around the convention.
Take care.